Okay, it looks like we are live, so we are ready to go. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Tiffany Muller, the president of In Citizens United and Let America Vote Action Fund. And we are so thrilled to have you with us today and to talk about the important issue of saving our democracy. And I do not say that lightheartedly. We really are in a critical moment for our democracy. And we could not be more thrilled to have two amazing special guests with us today. General Paul Eaton, who is representing VoteVets, and the amazing Senator Tammy Duckworth from the great state of Illinois. And we're going to get to them in just a second, but to kind of lay the groundwork about what we're talking about today. You know, last year during a pandemic, we actually saw a record number of Americans vote in the November election, higher turnout than we had ever seen in our country. And instead of celebrating that success and celebrating the expanded access to the ballot box in order to keep people safe, what we've seen is that this year, Republicans across the country have doubled down in state legislatures in order to actually block access to the ballot box and roll back the right to vote. There have been 400 bills proposed in 48 states across the country, with already 30 of those bills becoming law that further restrict the fundamental freedom to vote, the most cherished freedom that our country has. And this has really been a long-running plan in coordination with these big dark money groups in order to actually try to hold on to power and to rig the next election. And the insurrection on January 6th at the Capitol was the culmination of what we saw coming out of last year's election and the big lie. And it was a really horrific moment for our country. And as we've watched the testimony this week of what those Capitol Police officers went through and what they saw, I know that we are all reminded of the somberness of what we are facing right now and how important it is that we double down on saving our democracy. So last month, every single Senate Democrat voted to move forward with a bill called the For the People Act, which actually protects voting rights, ends the dominance of big money in politics, would stop partisan gerrymandering, and would battle corruption in our system. And unfortunately, every single Senate Republican filibustered it. But we're not going to give up, because we know that that was just one step in this process and that we are going to keep fighting, because this is such an important fight to be in. So since then, we have continued to host conversations like this with key individuals and champions on this issue, because we are determined to get this bill passed and over the finish line, both the For the People Act and the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. So that's why I'm so proud to host this event today with two amazing champions who understand this issue so well. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to retired Major General Paul D. Eaton, who is the former Iraq war commander and senior advisor to VoteVets, to say a few words and to introduce our very special guest. General?
Tiffany, thank you very much. And we're flattered to be included in this. VoteVets is a veterans organization. We're about 700,000 strong, and we absolutely support S1 and the HR1. The great importance of what we're talking about falls in line with what the military likes to help guide us. One, our oath, which is very similar to the oath that our senators and representatives take to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. And we're also guided by vital national interests. Now, most of our vital national interests relate to foreign policy, but domestic policy, and in this case, the legitimacy of our national elections, the legitimacy of our local elections, represent a vital national interest. So it is small wonder that soldiers all over the world, all our military, are focused on this, to the point where every commander has a voting officer. One of the subordinates is given the mission to ensure that soldiers know they have a duty to vote and know that they have the right to access their ballots. And those ballots tend to be on paper and have always been so since the Civil War, when we started voting by mail to ensure that soldiers represent and all military represent our citizens. So, without any further commentary, I'd like to introduce one of my heroes, one of the bravest people I have ever met. Mother, warrior, author, Tammy Duckworth, Democratic senator from the great state of Illinois. It is my great privilege to introduce you. Senator, over to you.
Oh my goodness, thank you, General. You're one of my heroes, and having served in Iraq early on, it's always surreal when I get to see you now. But it's such an important topic we're discussing today, and I'm really, really pleased to be here. And I'm going to shut up and let it go to the question and answers, because I think that's what most people want to see. Thank you.
Well, let's, thank you so much, Senator. Thank you so much, General. Let's jump right in. So Senator Duckworth, you are on the Senate Armed Services Committee, and obviously you had served our country as well. So you know what's at stake for the military in terms of democracy reform. Can you give our viewers a little bit of taste of what you think is really at stake for our military around democracy reform?
Oh, I mean, just the basic fundamental right of being able to vote. I voted by mail from Iraq. And I voted secure in the knowledge that my ballot was going to get counted. It was going to get delivered all the way back to the United States, and it was going to be counted. This was the 2004 presidential elections. And you know, what we're facing now is really a real need to act immediately, because an inaction, I agree with President Biden, inaction on things like ending Citizens United and getting this dark money out of politics, inaction on voting rights could have a devastating impact on our nation, not just on our troops, but on our nation. We have to protect, strengthen, defend every American's constitutional right. I mean, I remember being in Walter Reed after I was wounded, and Paul Wolfowitz, President Bush's Assistant Secretary of Defense, who came to visit us troops, and he brought me a picture of Iraqis who just voted and their thumbs were blue. I don't know if you remember that. We saw all the blue thumbs of all the Iraqis who got to vote freely for the first time without the intimidation tactics under the Saddam authoritarian regime. And they were actually able to vote for whoever they wanted to without anybody looking over their shoulder. They were able to vote freely and go to the polls. And I remember weeping with pride that I was able to contribute to making that happen. I never then, 17 years ago, thought I would be in a position now where I would question that right for Americans, that our own capital would be attacked by fellow Americans, by insurrectionists, and that literally Americans' rights to vote is on the line. So in all my years in the military, I never thought I'd have to defend democracy here on US soil, but that's where we are now.
Oh, and I think that's a great segue to ask General Eaton. I mean, our military does work to ensure good governance abroad, as the senator just talked about, with, you know, ensuring free and fair elections in countries across the world. So how do those foreign countries then view what is happening right here in America with these anti-democratic legislation that's being proposed and passed in states across America? How does that impact our foreign services abroad?
Sure, Tiffany, thank you very much. They are alarmed. Like most soldiers, I have worked with a lot of other armies, and we stay in contact with each other. And I've got a dear friend in about 7 different countries, and they are alarmed. And some of those countries border countries that are going autocratic right now in the former East Bloc. And they see America still as the bright and shining city on a hill. And the experience that I had in trying to rebuild the Iraqi army back in 2003, 2004, one of the pillars of our efforts was to develop an understanding of how the army operates within a democratic society. And I will tell you that the Iraqis still look up to us, still pay attention to what we are doing, and those Iraqi members of the national government are profoundly concerned that their efforts are going to be challenged by former autocrats within their society. So it's a dangerous time, and it is, to repeat myself, a vital national interest to ensure the integrity of our voting system. So we need to help our allies, and we need to instruct our adversaries on how to maintain a free and proper elective system.
I think that's part of the conversation that sometimes gets overlooked, is how important it is to our national security that we strengthen our democracy right here at home, and the ripple effect that that has for our national security across the globe. Senator, you talked about in your first answer, you actually talked about voting by mail when you were in Iraq in the 2004 presidential election. And last year during the pandemic, the option to vote by mail was really expanded to many Americans who could then vote by mail without having an excuse for the first time. And we know it was the most safe and secure election of our time. But there's been a lot of misinformation about mail-in voting and how mail-in voting leads to fraud, and but we know how long it's been used successfully by members of the military. And so can you talk a little bit about why it's so important to ensure that all Americans have access to vote by mail, but also how important it is to the military members to provide better access to vote by mail?
Absolutely. So there's a couple of things that are going on here. With vote by mail, you're ensuring that people who normally cannot make it to the polls, like our elderly, our disabled population, are able to actually cast their ballot. And I'll tell you, I voted at my local polling station just a few months ago for a local mayoral election in Illinois. And there was not a single working voting machine that I could access in my wheelchair that was working. The one handicap accessible one was broken. So I had to stand on one leg to try and balance myself and try to vote. Had I been able to, and had I been voting by mail, I would have been able to do that from the safety and security of my own home. And that would have been much better. And as with the aging of the baby boomer population, vote by mail is going to become even more important. As for our troops, they move around a lot. And because they're doing their duty, they're carrying out their duties. And so they want to be able to vote in their home of record, even though they may be stationed in Fort Bliss, Texas. They may be from Chicago, for example, and want to vote in the Chicago elections. Another thing that happens is that because they move so much, a lot of these very onerous ID card laws and all of these ID requirements makes it hard for our troops to meet the requirements. I'll give you an example. I had a staffer who left the Army and went right into school in California, graduated from school, drove across the country to come work for me in Chicago, and then came with me to Washington, D.C. when I was elected to the House. Got her driver's license in Virginia. She did all this in the space of 18 months, got a driver's license in Virginia, moved into a new apartment, and she went to vote in Virginia, where she lived in the right precinct, but they would not accept her federal worker's ID card as a congressional staffer. They wouldn't accept her VA ID card as valid. They wouldn't accept her own Virginia driver's license because it had a different address, because she just moved into her new house, and she couldn't vote. And the reason that she was in this flux was because she was moving as a soldier. She had to go someplace. She was, deployed, and she came back to California. From California, she was making her way back to Virginia, where she's from, and she couldn't vote. And so she had to do a provisional ballot. Went back the next day, did a provisional ballot. This is how we're disenfranchising people with these very onerous laws. And vote by mail really is something that is very safe, very secure. We've been doing it for over 150 years in this country. And I think we should also look at establishing access to the ballot box for troops through secure electronic voting systems as well. And I'm working on a piece of legislation for that also.
Look at me. A year and a half in, I still forget to unmute myself sometimes on Zoom. I think people don't realize that members of the military have been voting by mail since at least the Civil War, right? We can do this. We have the expertise, we have the experience, we know it is safe and it is secure. And for the brave men and women who are willing to go and defend our democracy, we should absolutely be making it easier to access and be a part of that democracy. So thank you so much, Senator. General, look, we are an organization called End Citizens United and Let America Vote, obviously, but one of our missions is to end the Supreme Court decision that allowed so much unlimited and undisclosed funding to just flood into our politics and into our electoral system. And what we've seen with that flood of money is foreign actors really pouring a lot of money into our elections as well, through dark money, through loopholes in our campaign finance system. So what can we do to limit foreign interference and influence in our elections?
Great question. We need to unleash the FBI, and we need to enlist the support of the CIA for external, outside our borders approach. Those two agencies have brilliant people who understand how to track money, how to find out sources, and some of the language that we have in this act is the approach to render transparent all money that is flowing into the system. And we've got our cyber checkers who are working the system to track this money. We are asking CEOs to come back and certify that foreign agents have not imposed upon them any kind of directives on how to make their donations. So the ending of the Citizens United Act, there's some preliminary steps that we can apply that will help us greatly to monitor the flow of money into the United States, to monitor what decisions our CEOs are rendering right now, and to do that great disinfectant, to apply sunshine to this money process in politics.
Thank you so much, General. And building on that, Senator, we also know that that same dark money and lots of money coming into our elections has really limited progress on many of the policy priorities for veterans, including providing stronger healthcare for veterans, right? So how would passing the For the People Act help make headway on these issues?
Well, thank you for that. Because what this dark money does is it puts people into office who will vote against many of these policies that affect veterans, as well as other Americans. They put into place people who will vote to reduce the healthcare available to our veterans, who will reduce the choices available. I mean, if you look at what happened in the last 4 years under the Trump administration, they spent a lot of time reducing access for veterans and reducing the amount of folks who could be hired into the VA. There's a severe doctor shortage. Look, every American deserves an equal opportunity to participate in our electoral system. But what we're seeing is a real immense amount of spending from corporations and special interests that crowds out those individual voices and millions of Americans. And it's way past time for common sense reform. You know, we need to restore trust in our election and our government. It's something as simple as you should be required to tell people who gave you money and where that money came from. And we don't know that. And if anything, the move is towards more and more dark money. So we don't know who's buying our elections. And simply, I mean, I'm for no outside money, and it's only public funding of campaigns and no donations. But before we get there, the first thing we can do is end Citizens United. We need to tighten the rules on super PACs. there's so many critical campaign finance reform proposals that we could put forward, especially in the For the People Act, that I hope are included in any future voting rights package. But our veterans are affected when dark money gets into politics, because the people who get into there are the ones who will, decide to vote that, hey, veterans have to pay more copay, or they shouldn't have access to choice, or maybe we're going to start shutting down VA hospitals and make people go to commercial facilities where they may not be as well cared for their war wounds, things like Gulf War syndromes, things like burn pit exposure, Agent Orange, the effects of Agent Orange. All of that is taken care of in the VA. It's not well handled by the outside medical system, and veterans might be pushed into that system and not get the kind of care they deserve.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is how it limits progress on. It doesn't always make sense to people until they hear someone like you explain it so well, how dark money coming in could also hurt veterans' healthcare. But it really is so interconnected. And we absolutely, like you said, it is way past time for common sense reforms. It is way past time. We should at least know where this money is coming from. All right, so believe it or not, we are already ticking through our time. So Senator Duckworth, back to voting. Why are the mail-in voting and early voting options that Republicans are trying to limit so important for millions of people with disabilities, including our nation's veterans with disabilities?
Well, first off, our polling stations are not 100% ADA compliant or accessible. So there are actually still polling stations that you can't get into easily with a wheelchair. I talked about the fact that the last time I went to vote, my polling station did not have a wheelchair accessible machine to use. There's so many barriers that Americans with disabilities can face when going to vote, not the least of which trying to get to the polling station, because if you're vision impaired and you don't drive, you can't get there. The inaccessible polling places, voting booths that are inaccessible. I was talking to someone and she said, well, my wheelchair, at my polling station, my wheelchair accessible machine was there and it was working, but it was only in Chinese. And so she had to have, but luckily there was one of the polling judges, one of the judges at the polling actually reads and speaks Mandarin. So she sat there and translated for her, so she would know what she was voting for. And yet, instead of making it easier for people to vote, we're seeing more anti-voter bills popping up all around the country. The safest, most secure place for me to vote is actually to get a ballot in my home so I can take the time to go through it and understand it and vote. But if you're visually impaired, if you have a cognitive impairment, if you can't drive, it makes it really hard if you have to go to a polling station. Americans with disabilities have the right to make their voices heard through the power of their ballots. That's why we actually should be improving access to the ballot box, and we should be making it easier to vote, not the other way around. And again, as the generational shift that's happening as baby boomers get into their 80s and 90s, which is just around the corner, you're going to see a huge population of Americans become disenfranchised if they can't have vote by mail.
Well, and the good news is we can do something about this, right? And you are on Capitol Hill fighting every day to do something about this. VoteVets, you have been such incredible partners in the fight to protect the fundamental freedom to vote and to get the For the People Act passed. And look, we still have time. So if you are joining us today, you already care about these issues. You care about ending dark money. You care about protecting the right to vote. But we need all of your voices, letting the senators know, letting the White House know, letting everyone know how important it is that we pass the For the People Act, the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, that we restore our democracy and protect it, because it is not just the right thing to do, but it is essential to our national security. So please go to actforthepeople.com, actforthepeople.com, and it will help get you connected with your lawmakers so that you can send a message in and say how important it is that we do this. Because we know that we are coming up, I cannot believe I'm gonna say this, we're coming up on the 2022 election far too quickly. And there are going to be too many people disenfranchised and left out of our democracy if we don't act now. So please join us today. And I know if you're watching, you already care about these issues. So thank you so much. Senator, General, it has been such a pleasure to have you both today and to do this conversation. And thank you both for just being such amazing champions and such leaders on this issue. It has been such a pleasure.
Thank you. Be well.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Here.